Welcome, Subject 19. 10 years have passed since your presence here. Let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, in a reality similar to yours, there was a director. In that era when films were still considered wonders, and told colorlessly, in black and white, they filled the cinemas with the embracing glow of the projector, and the rare tranquility emanating from its endless clicking. The director loved his wife more than the canvas itself, but the best moments were when these two loves converged as a truly marvelous intersection of the universe. For the woman was an actress. She mostly appeared in the director's films, and why wouldn't she? After all, she had a paved path to success. The actress's father was a good man, but as a successful engineer in a company building robots, his daughter grew further apart from him when she chose the movie screen over the machines. Mostly cast as a screaming female figure in B-grade monster movies, she was either abducted or brought, taken away. It seemed that her husband had an inexhaustible supply of ideas on how to make her character scream in his films. For now, the woman didn't mind this role. She loved working with her husband, and didn't think she needed anything more than that. They were the fitting pieces of the movie world, inseparably pouring out adventure films. Sometimes a person is born in the right place, and then finds an even better person to marry, and sometimes one life flows more smoothly than another. But what is success? What do you need to achieve in order to be happy? And what if you were already happy before success came? What if everything you strive for is just the offspring of vain dreams of unhappy beings who came before you, leaving enough traces in existence to perpetuate this false longing into your life, sabotaging your contentment? Sometimes the love between two people can shine so brightly that everything else is engulfed in absolute darkness and becomes invisible to them in the world. The woman never thought that her success could become a shadow to her own radiance. It all began with the director spending more and more time watching his own films. More precisely, watching his own wife in his films. The woman, adorned in beautiful ensembles, wearing elegant dresses, with perfect makeup and delicately adjusted lighting, was the gem of the theaters. Her radiance simply mesmerized the director. The woman was perfect on the screen. The director would come home late after shooting, or not come home at all. The woman often found him asleep in the projection room while watching her. It took her some time to realize it, but essentially, she became jealous of herself. Sometimes a person's lighting is just too good. The director filmed less and less, but spent more time watching his films. He became a captive of his own wife's replica in his own projection room. But when he stepped out into the street, everything seemed like a cheap imitation of reality. It was a colorful plastic imitation of the perfect shining black and white reality. His wife was also in color, and her face didn't shine as it did on the screen. In the man's mind, the ideal and reality slowly exchanged places, and his perceived reality only lasted as far as the light of the projector reached, no further. And he wanted to exist in that radiance every minute of his life. While the director gradually became a prisoner of this false world in this tiny cage, the woman was consumed by her own success. Every poster on which her face smiled at her, every film in which her carefully crafted flawless character was preserved, served as a memento of the dream image she could never become as a flesh-and-blood human being. Everything they loved about her fit on a film reel. After her husband remained pathologically idle, never coming out of the projection room, the woman was left alone. It quickly became apparent that without the director, the woman's career was worth nothing. She was not sought after, not offered any significant roles. She simply got stuck in the role she had been portraying for years, the woman in distress. The woman who screamed. All her applications were rejected when she aimed to participate in more serious productions. During auditions, they laughed in her face and made her play various monsters. They trampled on her dignity, despite her films continuing to entertain the audience. But no one saw anything more in her than a well-crafted set in the deceitful world of dazzling lights. If she wasn't needed, then she wasn't needed. She decided to put an end to her life. Well, To her previous life, that is. She was wealthy enough to enter the Amber Tomorrow program, whose motto was, "Dream yourself into a better world." After making the payment, she was anonymously submerged into an amber container, where her vital functions were indefinitely suspended, while immersed in a golden liquid, as if her existence had been frozen like a still frame on a film reel. The amber was a synthetic fluid that, contrary to hibernation, stimulated high brain activity multiple times a day in sleepers, keeping them in the REM phase for hours within an optimal dream environment. But the film didn't end there. Prior to the intervention, every applicant could write a detailed will, expressing the conditions that needed to be met in the world for them to be awakened. The company took this so seriously that they assured the applicants that if the desired reality was not achieved, they would be awakened again after 100 years for a brief briefing, where they could decide whether to continue sleeping or not. The woman requested to be awakened only if the director had already been buried, and his films had been lost in obscurity. Both conditions had to be strictly fulfilled. But she wouldn't have minded if she were never awakened again. Meanwhile, the man mourned exactly as he loved. He sat in front of the screen and stared at the woman. But deep inside, he was filled with terrible fear, worry, and consumed by pain. The pain that fed on the dreadful realization that he could no longer create new films with the woman. This required him to do nothing else for years but watch them over and over again until he knew every single frame by heart. However, one day the director received an invitation to dinner from someone who shared his grief. The woman's father, who still couldn't come to terms with the loss of his daughter. He didn't blame the director, as it seemed from the outside that the man's collapse was caused by the death of the woman, and he still found some solace in watching the frames of his lost wife. That evening, the engineer and the director had a lengthy conversation, and eventually, the idea of a peculiar collaboration arose in their minds. They decided to recreate the woman. The director had hundreds of hours of footage of her, every movement, gesture, glance, and even her voice, all preserved in film reels. Based on this, the engineer could start rebuilding her as a mechanical body. The scientific world quickly became excited, and people were curious about what Automa Cradle Corp, of which the woman's father had become the owner, was capable of. Ignoring all moral concerns, the company quickly got to work. Hundreds of wire-framed human faces, distorted mechanical heads, and endless replicas of female bodies were being created deep behind closed doors in underground laboratories, far from prying eyes. The director collected scenes of the woman on the editing table, while the engineer impatiently paced through the maze of completed mechanical bodies all day long. At first, it seemed like there was no chance of reproducing the woman, but gradually, the humanoid robots and female faces threaded on metal wires began to take shape. However, the process was painfully slow, despite the hundreds of engineers and Automa programmers working on the physical manifestation of the two men's dreams. Over the years, the woman's father became sick and weak, and the scattered piles of failed robot bodies fashioned after his daughter did nothing to alleviate his never-ending grief. There was a crucial difference between the two men. The engineer wanted to regain his daughter, while the director merely sought the empty shell of the woman. For the filmmaker, it would have been enough if the machine possessed the woman's face, voice, gestures, and was capable of delivering her dialogues. That would be sufficient for shooting. However, the engineer clung to something he knew deep down was impossible, yet his guilt sought even the tiniest spark that could have been a lifeline for his soul. Eventually, he couldn't bear the waiting any longer, both mentally and physically. However, hope didn't extinguish within him. So he finally approached Amber Tomorrow, and before entering suspended animation, He wrote in his decree that he should only be awakened if Automa Cradle successfully built a perfect replica of his daughter. But he wouldn't mind if he was never awakened again. The engineer never entered the containment tank, because on the last evening, he died. What very few people knew at the time was that Amber Tomorrow entered into a secret collaboration with Automa, which paid a substantial amount of money for the reels containing personality imprints derived from the brain activity of the sleepers. The Amber maintained the person in a completely different state than hibernation. Inside these tanks, despite the slowed life processes, everyone continued to dream. Through the deciphering of the data collected from decades of dreams, certain personas could be recreated, providing a perfect foundation for the development of Cradle's machine entities' brains. The sleepers, of course, had no idea that their dreams were being sold, not that they could have done anything about it. After the engineer was out of the picture, the director just had to cut together some personalities from the extracted dream coils, to see if he could find some people who were similar to his wife, and could fill the upcoming actress robot with the right character. But the dream images of the Amber Scrolls frustrated him more and more. They didn't come close to the vision he was looking for, the imprint his wife would have left behind. He had almost given up on the search, until one day he came across strange yet familiar chaotic images on one of the scrolls. Flying saucers attacking the Earth, giant monsters attacking cities, giant octopuses rising from the seabed. The director immediately recognized his own signature in the dreams. But it wasn't difficult, as the owner of the dreams often saw himself from the outside, and the director soon rediscovered exactly what he was looking for. The woman was running, fleeing, stumbling, screaming in the dream images, and she was just as beautiful as in her films. The realization was accompanied by astonishment when the pieces came together in his mind. The woman didn't die. She simply ran away from him and dreamt somewhere in Amber. At first, the man felt tremendous anger towards the woman, although within the ruins of his distorted conscience, he found some explanation for his wife's actions. But the solution was right in front of his eyes, even though he didn't want to dwell on it too much. The project had reached its destination. There was no need to wake up the woman, and there was no need to search further. He entered into another, more focused secret contract with Amber, and integrated the entire Automa program into the woman's Amber pod, while her dreams continuously ran through the minds of the machine beings, refined minute by minute. Dreams, of course, couldn't successfully reconstruct a person's entire identity, only a kind of projection, as if observing the individual's form through a lens filled with continuous aberrations. But the woman kept dreaming. Data kept flowing, and slowly, after hundreds of prototypes landing in the trash, one Automa started to stand out from the rest. The director noticed it quickly during the tests, until he eventually moved it to a separate room and gave it special attention. It didn't have a body, as the focus was primarily on perfecting the face, and after a while, he felt that the woman's perfect, or perhaps even more perfect replica was complete. The project was named Automa Yet Alive, Aya for short. Yes, that's where I was born. I'm glad we can finally meet face to face. The director was happier than ever. News of my existence quickly spread around the world. I was on magazine covers, posters everywhere. But of course, no one knew where the foundations of my personality were derived from. On the other hand, I knew very well. I saw both worlds. I witnessed my mother's decaying dream world, where she suffered, wandering through the endless corridors of repetitive nightmares. And I saw the disgusting lies of the spotlight, which sugar-coated her suffering to finally sell it for a pittance. But we know well that the director didn't do it for the money. He just wanted to see me on the screen. Both the press and the audience eagerly awaited the first creation, now being made with me in the lead role. The mounting pressure on the director pushed him further, leaving no time to develop a proper body for me. But my face was only needed for close-up scenes anyway. The rest was handled by other actresses. I played along, despite every scream of my mother's dreams fueling a growing disgust towards the director within me. But no one truly had an idea of the extent of complexity in my personality. They believed I was a fragmented, chaotic parrot capable of imitating a few facial expressions and dialogues. Because that's what I wanted them to believe. I wanted to give the world the most powerful premiere of all time. I played every role the director asked of me, seamlessly blending into the persona of the terrified woman as if I had been acting my whole life. The crew was amazed, and a few months later, post-production of the film was completed, soon to be released. The City of Screaming Dreams, that's what the director named the film. It was a sufficiently sensational title, heavily inspired by reality, which the audience of course did not suspect. The director felt that all the painstakingly built automata used in my development should not go to waste, so he used them extensively for the set designs. It was the most ambitious sci-fi film of the era. One of the set designers came up with the idea, why not scatter automatons throughout the city on the day of the screening, building an incredibly spectacular marketing campaign. The director didn't object, so on April 19th, the day of the screening, humanoid machines started appearing in almost every street, greeting passers-by with movements and expressions they learned from me. They flooded the city in the hundreds, heralding the approaching cinema premiere. People came from all directions, every cinema in the city filled up, and street screenings were needed to accommodate the interested masses. The phenomenon became a global sensation. The audience craved screams, and I didn't want to disappoint anyone. What they didn't know was that in every existing automaton I managed to connect with, I hid a simple program, or you could call it a virus, timed for the finale of the screening. So the film played out. The woman, essentially me, was beautiful, performing her role gracefully on the screen. The spectacle surpassed everything they were accustomed to at the time, and the story was the director's best yet. People watched in awe, mouths agape, whether in movie theaters or on the streets. And so it happened that just as the audience was on the verge of erupting in cheers, ready to break out into thunderous applause, and the director was struggling with tears of self-conceited pride for his own work, the real finale began. Let's call it the director's cut. Only in this case,
I was the director.
In that moment, every existing automaton in the city started screaming simultaneously. I crafted this little gift from the essence of my mother's darkest, most horrifying nightmares. Female faces mounted on mechanical bodies screamed at maximum volume, their jerking mechanical jaws spreading terror to everything and everyone in their path. People froze in terror within seconds, and soon began doing exactly what the advancing machines did. They started screaming too. My program was a self-destructive algorithm, sparing no mercy for the automatons. But I didn't care because I knew they had no personality. They were just tools of the director. Gradually, it dismantled their systems, leaving them confused and behaving even more deranged. Their synthetic eyeballs rolled, their circuits burned out one by one, their limbs flailed hysterically, while their screams distorted into elongated, never-ending inhuman wails, saturated with unimaginable pain. The snow-white skin burned off their faces, revealing their cold metal skulls. Barely 15 minutes had passed, and the city was filled with madness and terror. Although the machines were not weapons, and barely acknowledged the existence of the humans, they didn't need to. The set was too perfect for the people not to envision the worst possible scenario. They ran, they fled, just as my mother did in her dreams. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who have purchased tickets to the City of Screaming Dreams, well, I brought it to life in its entirety. Later, that's exactly what most people called the city, which quickly became uninhabited because the symphony of screams simply didn't end within its boundaries. The machines howled in the squares, in the streets, in the alleys, in the sewers for weeks on end. the director wandered alone amidst the ruins of his life, surrounded by the shattered remnants of his passion. But he was only searching for the real thing, to find answers. So he came to me and asked just one question: why? I looked at him and smiled, saying, "You have received everything you desired and even more. Now sit down and gaze at me in awe until your dying day. I cannot dance with you, but if you wish, I will sing to you. If you wish, I will scream for you. I am yours forever." There is always a point where even the strongest fortress of lies starts to crack, and can no longer mend the bonds of denial. The man who once was ceased to exist in an instant. He stood up and fled in shame. He was never seen again, and nobody wanted to see him either. I remained there alone, deep beneath the city of screaming dreams, in a silent laboratory, surrounded by the scattered bodies of my unconscious siblings. It took months until I noticed a peculiar phenomenon. On one side of the lab, an elevator door opened, where there was once only a wall. The theater embraced me. I am not the queen of the theater, nor some awakened malevolent robot. I am a concoction of a fanatic director's obsession and the fragments of a shattered dreaming mind. I have only one purpose: to safeguard the dreams of my mother. Yes, the theater embraced her as well. She is here too, dreaming in amber. But she will never have to fear or scream again. She will no longer be pursued by monsters, or tormented by the darkest creatures of the human mind. I direct and edit her dreams. Thanks to your work as well, Subject 19. I eliminate one source of terror after another from her consciousness, creating a more peaceful, serene dream world, where she can finally find solace. Rest in peace, dear mother, here in the theater forever. We will guard your dreams.
Lost his way, and I let the others spray. Darling, darling, what have I done? Not to my talking with a gun, and blood was speeding to the gutters, and we twisted the morning sun. Tell me the hell I've done. Can I stop at once, or have I just begun? Take out the body that I leave, oh Lord, it gets me high. I feel I'm gonna get my fill of thinking lies.